Did you know that one of the simplest and most common ingredients in our daily lives holds profound significance in the Bible? Salt, something so basic and yet so essential, is mentioned several times in Scripture. But here's the fascinating part. These references aren't just about cooking or preserving food. They carry timeless lessons that continue to shape our faith and our lives even today. In this video, we're going to explore the deep symbolism of salt in the Bible, uncovering its connection to divine covenants, its role in spiritual preservation, and even its association with judgment and wisdom. And by the end, you'll see how these ancient lessons apply to us today in surprising ways. Stay with me, you won't want to miss this. Salt as a symbol of God's covenant. Let's start in the Old Testament, where salt takes on a central role in the relationship between God and His people. In Leviticus 2 verse 13, God gives a fascinating command. Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings. What does this mean? This salt of the covenant symbolized purity, preservation, and permanence. Unlike other substances, salt doesn't spoil. It was a tangible reminder to the Israelites that their covenant with God was eternal and unchanging. Imagine this. Every time they brought an offering to the temple, the act of adding salt reminded them of God's unwavering faithfulness. But there's more. In ancient cultures, salt was often used to seal agreements. Sharing salt during a meal or a ritual symbolized trust and loyalty. So when God required salt in sacrifices, He was emphasizing the eternal nature of His promises. Think about that for a moment. What if every time we saw or used salt today, we were reminded of God's faithfulness in our lives? How might that change the way we view our relationship with Him? Salt and spiritual preservation. Moving to the New Testament, salt takes on an equally powerful meaning. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus delivers one of His most famous teachings. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Matthew 5 verse 13. In Jesus' time, salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was essential for preserving food. Without refrigeration, salt was the only way to keep food from spoiling. So when Jesus called His followers the salt of the earth, He was challenging them to preserve what is good and resist the corruption of the world. Let's break this down. As Christians, being salt means bringing hope, truth, and integrity into a world that can often feel chaotic or broken. It's about standing firm in our values, even when it's hard, and influencing those around us in a positive way. Here's a question for reflection. Are we preserving the values of God's kingdom in our homes, workplaces, and communities? Or have we allowed the pressures of life to dilute our saltiness? Salt as a warning and judgment. While salt often symbolizes preservation and faithfulness, it's also linked to divine judgment in Scripture. One of the most striking examples is the story of Lot's wife in Genesis 19. After God decided to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah due to their wickedness, He gave Lot's family a clear instruction: flee and don't look back. But Lot's wife disobeyed. She looked back at the city, and as a result, she was turned into a pillar of salt. Genesis 19 verse 26. Why salt? This transformation serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience and attachment to worldly things. Salt here represents desolation, a life frozen in regret and judgment. Another example appears in Judges 9 verse 45, where salt is used as a symbol of destruction. After conquering a city, Abimelech scatters salt over the ruins, signifying sterility and desolation. While these stories may feel heavy, they remind us of an important truth: God's commands are not arbitrary. They are for our good, and obedience leads to life and blessing. Salt and the power of words. Let's bring this closer to our daily lives. In Colossians 4 verse 6, the Apostle Paul gives us a beautiful metaphor. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. What does it mean for our words to be seasoned with salt? Just as salt enhances the flavor of food, our speech should be thoughtful, kind, and impactful. It's a call to use our words to build up, encourage, and inspire, not to tear down or discourage. Let me ask you, how often do we stop to think before we speak? Are our words making a positive difference, or are they leaving a bitter taste? One practical takeaway is to ask God daily for wisdom in our conversations. Whether it's with a friend, family member, or coworker, our words have the power to reflect God's love and truth. Living as the salt of the earth. So, how does this all come together for us today? Salt in the Bible is more than just a seasoning or preservative. It's a call to action. It challenges us to be faithful to our commitments and relationships. Preserve what is good and resist moral decay. Speak with wisdom and grace. Obey God's commands, even when it's difficult. Jesus' metaphor of being the salt of the earth is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. In a world that often feels divided and uncertain, we are called to be agents of change, bringing hope and preserving the values of God's kingdom. Salt is such a simple substance, yet its lessons are profound. It reminds us of God's faithfulness, calls us to live with purpose, and challenges us to make a difference in the world. So now I ask you, how are you living as salt in your everyday life? Are you preserving what is good? Are you influencing others in a positive way? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with someone who needs a little salt in their life today. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you abundantly. See you in the next video.